Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome indeed to the service here at Hamilton Parish Church this morning. As always, if you're a visitor, then please come along and join us after the service for a cup of tea and a cup of coffee and a chat, and make yourself known to us. If you're watching this by live streaming, you two are very, very welcome indeed. It's great to have you with us. And also, if you're watching this later as a recording later at home, then you two are most welcome. It's great to have you with us. And sometime maybe those watching the recordings or watching the live streaming will actually be here with us at the service. If you can manage that, that really would be super. The intimations are as per your order of service. I've been asked to draw some of them to your attention. And sadly, you'll see in your order of service that Elizabeth Gardner's funeral takes place next week, next Friday I should say, in the church at 11 a.m. and thereafter at South Lanarkshire Crematorium. Would you please, I beg your pardon, it's not Daldowie, Bent Cemetery. Right, I'll try again. Elizabeth's funeral will take place Friday the 28th, 11 a.m. here, thereafter at Bent Cemetery at 12 noon. Please remember the family in your prayers. For those of you who don't know, Frank was supposed to get out of hospital over the weekend, had a wee bit of a hiccup, so we're now looking towards Monday, and hopefully Frank will be out of hospital on Monday. World Thinking Day today for the Guides and the Brownies, and the 12th Hamilton Brownies are here this morning, and we give a warm welcome to them and their leaders. They're also hosting the tea and coffee fellowship after the service, and your support of that would be very much appreciated. The Lanarkshire district of the Fellowship of the Boys Brigade is producing a one-off charity concert in aid of two local charities, Hope for Autism and You Are My Sunshine. The concert's going to take place, as you see in your order of service, on Saturday 29th February at Dale St Andrews in Mary Street in Motherwell. Doors open at 7 for 7:30. Tickets are £5. There are some super acts, supporting acts at that concert, and Alistair Buttery has asked me to commend it to you. As Ross said last week, Hamilton Presbytery invites you to the XYZ event. It's a free intergenerational ministry event for everyone, and that takes place on Saturday the 14th at 10 a.m. Till 4 p.m. in Motherwell South Parish Church. A variety of speakers, a variety of workshops, and once again you're encouraged to attend that. There will be a Pro Renata session meeting next Sunday, the 1st of March, here in the church. That's to allow session to attest the books for attestation on the 10th of March. The books will be available for session members to view if they wish to in the office from the beginning of the service and of course at the end of the service, and there will be a Pro Renata meeting formally to attest those records. And finally, session members are reminded, those who are involved in communion, serving of communion on the 10th of March, that there will be a rehearsal after the service this morning. Normally it would be the service just before the communion, a week before the communion, but because of the Pro Renata, it will now be this morning. So if you're serving communion, a short rehearsal this morning. Those are all the intimations. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to you indeed this morning. I can't believe how much brighter it is today than it was this time yesterday. The weather finally seems to be improving just a little bit, but goodness knows what else we've got in store for us for the rest of the winter. But it's lovely to have a little bit of sunshine and an opportunity to gather together. Today, of course, also recalls both the Guides and the Brownies Thinking Day and also the Cubs and the Scouts Founders Day, as it's the anniversary of the birthday of Lord Robert Baden-Powell and also his wife Olev on February the 22nd, just yesterday, who founded those organisations. It's 110 years of the Guides as the guiding movement. That is quite astounding when you think about that. And of course, whilst we'll also have parts of the service today involving our guides, which is lovely, we also have the Guides and the Brownies coffee morning afterwards, and they'll be helping out with the fellowship there in the halls after the morning service. So if it isn't normally your custom to stay back for coffee, can I invite you please to think about that and to come back and both support that and have an opportunity just to see one another for a few minutes afterwards as well. We are of course called to worship this morning, and we do so with the words of Psalm 8, and there we read as some of the refrains: O Lord our God, your greatness is seen in all the world. Your praise reaches up to the heavens. It is sung by children and babes. And with that refrain in our minds and ears, let's stand if we're able and sing hymn 470, Jesus Shall Reign. Faith that made Isaac promise blessings for the future of Jacob and Esau. And again, with these thoughts in mind, we seat ourselves as we prepare our hearts for prayer. Let's be seated. Let us pray. Father, God, you take us on a journey of relationship, a journey of blessings and a journey of friendships, the blessings of the family of God, whether we be a Jacob or an Esau, Joshua, or an Isaac in all our various generations, or even having the faith of Abraham himself. Lord, as we gather here in this place and at this time, a place that's so familiar and a time that's set in our calendars, we thank you that you are here to meet with us. We thank you that we are here to meet with you afresh. May this gathering today be a time and a space when we find a moment in and out of time, a moment of meeting with you. And the daily veil that at times covers our world and covers our lives is removed, and we see something of your glory. Glory revealed in the beauty of the universe that you've created. Beauty revealed in the community that we're part of. And beauty revealed to us in your precious word. Most of all, beauty revealed in the love of your Son, Jesus Christ. Help us again today to come away with you to a quiet place, to meet with you in new ways, ways that help us to glimpse how things really are when we truly come into your presence, when we truly allow your light to transform us and the whole world. So it is in the transforming power of your light, your love, your Son, that we take his words upon our lips, praying together, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Now I wonder if some of our younger ones might like to join me just for a moment or two down at the front. We're taking just a little change this week from some of the previous weeks when we've been looking at the Apostles' Creed. We can look at something a little bit different today because there are a few things that's a little bit different about the church today. What's different in the church today? Do you notice anything first of all?
Sunshine.
Oh. Sunshine. Thanks, Ian. All right, we've got sunshine. After 2 or 3 weeks of dismal clouds and darkness, we've actually got sunshine. Kyle, what have you noticed? We've got some flags. Yeah, we've got the colours there for the guides. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, and today, of course, is Thinking Day. We're especially thinking about the guides. We've got guides and brownies and rainbows that are all associated with our congregation. As I was looking at some of the materials on the guiding website, because there's lots of stuff there around what the guiding movement's about, and especially about Thinking Day, what we're thinking about today. There was something that really jumped out at me, a document that was there about things you might think about on Thinking Day. And they were about three particular words were picked out there. They were equality, diversity, actually I've got that slightly wrong, I'll get them in the right order, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Get the right words. Often we think about equality and diversity, I'll come back to that in just a second, but the three main words that were there for thinking about today were diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're going to think about them just for a few moments, just very briefly really. But we more commonly think about them in the phrase equality and diversity. I don't know if the younger ones here are familiar with some of the terms there. Hello, my darling. She's there. No, look at her doing some amazing walking as well. You going over here? Yeah? Come on then. Here we go. Because this is actually one of the first of our things to do with equality and diversity. Did you know that age is something that's part of equality and diversity? Whether we're young and discriminated against or involved, or old and discriminated against or involved, ageism, as it's now called, I don't know if that's a more modern coining of the phrase, is part of equality and diversity. If, for example, we apply for a job and the terms and the reasons we're not given that is because we're too old for the job, rather than on the basis of our own capabilities and abilities and training and such like, if we're told that we're too old for a job, or even too young for a job sometimes, that's actually a form of discrimination. That's quite a thought, isn't it? And I think, particularly myself as a middle-aged man, in that bracket where very often in a lot of trades and industries and professions, you hit middle age and suddenly a lot of people found themselves less employable because of their age, it's something that maybe strikes a little close to home. So that's something there. So that's one of the things that we often think about with regards to equality and diversity. I'm not expecting the younger ones necessarily to know all the things to do with equality and diversity. If you can think of one and want to stick your hand up, feel free to fire it in. But, go for it. Does equality mean everybody's treated the same? I think the answer to that's yes, but I'm going to develop that theme in just a second. So thank you for that. Yes, everybody being treated the same. What are some of the other things we think of when we think of equality and diversity? I'm asking the adults as well here. When we think about that legislation around equality and diversity, what do you think about? What are some of the key things? There's about 5 or 6 different things. Age. Disability. Thank you, Linda. Important one. Where did that come from? So at the back there. Colour. Yeah. Religion. Yeah. Gender. Yeah. These are all things to do with equality and diversity. Sexuality. Race. And we're going to develop some of these themes, especially around race and colour, throughout the service this morning. Of course, we picked on the first one as age, which is a really valid one when we've got very little ones in the congregation, and all the way through to quite old ones. I won't point you out. You know who you are. And everything in between, most importantly. But when we think about that, I really do want us to ponder about that. I'm just going to stick with age just for a second, because when it comes to age, our congregation is composed of people from the very youngest of ages through to the oldest of ages, who still attend regularly, which is fantastic, and we're all in here together. In fact, this morning, we're all in here together for service. So if you're expecting the Church of God together. I've mentioned last week, I think, and it's in the intimation sheet again today, that next month there's going to be an intergenerational event that the Presbytery is holding, and it's actually going to be hosted by Motherwell South Congregation, and we're encouraged to attend that and think about how we work together and we worship together intergenerationally, all of us together. So think about that. What I was particularly struck by looking at the web page for the guiding movement, though, particularly thinking about today, was not just equality and diversity as we think about it, but those 3 words of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to give you just 2 quotes. I'm just going to leave you with these thoughts. 2 quotes, and I'll say them slowly so we hopefully get the point of what they're saying. Diversity is being invited to the party. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. It's being asked to dance. Do you get the nuance there? Diversity is being invited to the party. All of us. And we're all here this morning. Inclusion is being asked to dance. To be part and parcel of the movement of what's taking on. That's a quote by Vernon Myers. A second quote here by Nahid Dosani is about equality. We think about equality and diversity. Equality, and we heard this a little earlier, equality is for everybody being involved. And this quote says this: equality is giving everyone a shoe. Equality is giving everyone a shoe. That seems fair enough, doesn't it? But equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. Equity is giving everyone a shoe that fits. So I don't know if you're looking down at your feet just at the minute. My size 9s I'm looking at here. I'm glad I've got shoes that fit. It's one thing sure, it's another thing entirely having shoes that fit properly so they're not pinching or slopping around on our feet. And there's a distinction there again to be made between just equality where everybody is perhaps involved, but also feeling they fit. And that's vitally important that we think about that and are quite intentional about how we have our relationships, how we worship with one another, how we work together, and everything as well. From the youngest to the oldest, and everything in between, with all those distinctive characteristics that make us who we are. So that's just a little bit of something that the guys have been thinking about, particularly in this particular season, and particularly for today. And we're going to take the opportunity now to let our guiding movement, our brownies, make their promises. So I'm going to invite Gillian Davison up to take them through their promises just now. Hello, Rascal.
As an officer in the Girl Guiding Movement, I'd like to invite brownies, guides, leaders and anyone who's made their promise to stand and renew it now with me. The promise can be found in the insert of the order service. I promise that I will do my best to be true to myself and to develop my beliefs, to serve the Queen in my community, to help other people and to keep the guide warm.
Thank you, ladies, for whatever age and vintage you might be, from the youngest to the oldest. Thank you for taking part in that. I can't help but reflect on the fact, just as you were saying that actually this morning we've got somebody missing from our company, which of course is Elizabeth Gardner, who's very, very proud of the years that she spent in the guiding movement and as a ranger as well, and all the various organisations involved with that. And so when we think of our guides from the very youngest to the very oldest, those who've gone before and those who will yet be, we think about the promises that they make and the contribution that they make to our society, and they make also to our congregational life as well, and we give thanks for them. We remember that God loved the world in all the friendships that we enjoy throughout the world and even locally in the different movements and organisations we have. So let's stand again if we're able and sing our next hymn. Hymn 564, Jesus Loves Me, This I Know.
They
This is the first of our readings, our Old Testament lesson, which is to be found in Genesis, the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible, chapter 21. And there you'll find that in your various pew Bibles, your English Bible on page 15. Or if you have the Good News Bible there, you'll find it in the New Testament section, page 21. So it's Genesis, sorry, it's not New Testament section, Old Testament section, start of the Bible, page 21. So it's Genesis 21, the first 13 verses.
Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held the great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. Amen.
So thank you for that reading. What makes one person different from another? What makes one person different from another? I don't know about you, but more often than not, I think it's how somebody looks. You know, the first thing very often we think about is our faculty of sight and what we see. Is that a fair comment? For those whose perhaps sight is diminishing a little bit, or for those who are completely blind for that matter, maybe that's not quite as much the case. Maybe it's the first thing they hear. And even in the inflection of a voice, you can pick up certain things. But very often it's how somebody looks that we perhaps make our first impressions, or our first impressions are given us. Perhaps from a far distance, it might be the way they walk, the way they dress, or what they're engaged in doing. Or when they get a little bit closer, you see their facial features. You might first of all actually see the colour of their skin, or the colour of their hair, or how their face is actually made up perhaps. Particularly around the face is something that we're acutely attuned to working out one distinction from one person to another. So you can have two people with exactly the same skin colour, for example. You might have a bit of an idea where they come from just by the way their facial features look. Is that a fair comment? Yeah? We use the faculty of our sight so often when it comes to these kind of things. And unfortunately we can be quite quick to judge on the basis of that, but in some cases maybe that's less the case. In some cases maybe it continues to be the case. The judgments can be made quite quickly just on the basis of how someone looks. And one of the particular area that's certainly the case in is the colour of our skin. Yeah? It's something we can't do anything about. Very little about, and how we look is very much a big part of that. We've just heard a reading of Scripture where there were two races mentioned. Did you pick that up? It was to do with the children of Abraham. Now, Abraham had two boys in particular in this reading that we've just read about. I'm sorry it's about the guiding today in particular, but it's Boy Scouts Day as well. There was two boys in this case, Ishmael and Isaac. Okay, so these are the two boys that we're thinking about. They're the same dad, Abraham, but they're two different mums. Ishmael's mum was Hagar, and she was an Egyptian, we're told. So if you know anything about Egypt, that's the part of the world that she came from, and she bore Abraham a son. So Hagar the Egyptian, we're told. But the other mum was Sarah. Sarah was from the same part of the world as Abraham. Now, in modern day terms, we'd place that probably in Iraq. If you think about I'll turn around just for a second for the benefit of most of you. If you think of a map and where Iraq sits in the world, on the bottom right-hand side of it, near that small country of Kuwait, that we heard of in the news in the last couple of decades quite a bit about, but over in that kind of corner, heading over that way, is where they were originally from. And of course they made a big long journey up the country, up the river Euphrates very likely, and then all the way back down the coast of the Mediterranean into the land of Israel. But that's where they were from. They weren't from Israel. Abraham and Sarah weren't from Israel at all. They'd originally come from what we would nowadays call Iraq. At that time it was the land of the Chaldeans, or the Chaldees, and that's where they were from. And no doubt they looked quite different. No doubt they looked quite different. They were almost a different race, if you like, a different stock. And that was distinguishable. And unfortunately, there was a bit of a problem between the two boys, first of all. The older boy, Ishmael, he was a good 14 years older than his little brother, was picking on him a little bit, or mocking him, or teasing him. Actually, he was probably bullying him, if you put it in proper broad terms, because he was 14. And this little nipper, he was 14 years older rather, and this little nipper, we're not quite sure exactly what age he was at this point, probably somewhere between 2 and 5. He could have been as old as 5 at this particular point. But he was picking on him. And I don't know about you, if you've ever had your boys or your girls picked on, what's your immediate response to that? There's a few mutters there at that point, yeah? The immediate response to that is defensiveness, protection. You want to look after your own. You want to protect them somehow. This is my family. And immediately Sarah does just that. But unfortunately, her recourse here isn't just directly to say, I don't want this to take place. She gets a little bit racist about it, if I'm honest with you. Hagar the Egyptian is the one that gets it in the neck at this point, and she wants Hagar and her son out of the house. It wants nothing to do with them. What a difficulty. What a difficulty. That subtle difference. One big family at that point, just before that point, but issues within the family, fractures within the relationships, an issue of bullying that takes place, and of course the result of that is it really does flare up. It's a really big problem. You can imagine that, can't you? Just what difficulty that would actually be. There was no friendship to be found, certainly initially between these two boys, and certainly not between the mothers, in all that was taking place there. It caused problems, starting with this bullying, but also other issues got kind of brought to the surface. You know, we see that so often these days too, don't we? We see it so often in everyday life. Small things, small upsets between people, and suddenly things that have got nothing to do with the issue at hand suddenly become prominent and become the reason why one person doesn't like another person. It's dreadful, but it's human nature, it would seem. I was quite struck just this last week. I saw something, a story on the internet, it was from over in Australia, a young boy called Caden. This young laddie stuck out in his school, I don't know if you heard the story, because he was native Australian, and he, I don't want to use the word suffered because that's not necessarily totally appropriate, but he has a condition of dwarfism. And so because of that, he looks quite different. He's quite a bit shorter than all his friends. He's 9 years old, but when I think about how tall 9-year-olds normally are, this wee laddie is quite a bit shorter. And his mum took a video on her phone one day after school because the kids there had been picking on him. And he was frankly sick of it. If you've ever been bullied in school, you perhaps have a feeling for what that's about. You have fellow feeling with him in that. But one of the lads came up to him at the end of the school day. He's just about to go home and get a bit of release from it, and he gets patted on the head, this wee laddie, for being so small. And he immediately bursts into tears. He runs to the car, and his mum continues this video of what takes place then. And the little lad, I mean, your heart goes out to him because he quite literally said he wanted to die. He just wanted an end of it. Because the bullying had so upset him, and it had been so continuous, this is how the poor lad felt. And if you've been on the receiving end of discrimination or bullying, perhaps you can have some fellow feeling with how the wee laddie felt. 9 years old, unable to defend himself, and being the butt of people's jokes, really hurt. I just wanted to die. He just didn't want to be there. He was so upset. One delight in that, actually, because it did go, as they call it, viral on the internet, is that quite a number of people actually stepped forward and said, look mate, you've got friends. Hugh Jackman, who's involved in a number of films, perhaps you're familiar with him from Les Miserables. He was the lead in that fairly recently, one of the leads in that. Played Wolverine and other different characters. He's a big Hollywood star and an Australian. He came on just to say, give a little message to this laddie. You know, you're all right, mate. We've got your back. We'll support you. You've got a friend in me. The Maori All-Stars, which is an Australian football team out there, they stepped forward and put a little video out because they're an indigenous football team out there. They went out and they said, look, stick around, mate. Don't do anything silly, because on Saturday, and that was just yesterday, on Saturday, we want you to lead us out. And you know what he did? There he was with the football, rugby football sized shape. He led them out and handed the football over for them to be able to start playing. A delightful scene for that wee laddie. There's been money raised. He can go to America, to Disneyland, and all these kind of things, big kind of efforts. But is it the big things that will make a difference for his life? Here's where we really come down to the crux of it. It's the small things, everyday things, isn't it? They're going to make a difference in that wee laddie's life. How people look at him. How people respond to him. How they speak to him. How they react when they hear him. How they react when they see him in the street. How we look at people and how we respond to them when we see them and when we hear them can have a huge influence on how they feel. We see it in this day and age. We see it all through history. On the counter of that, friendships, true friendships, despite what people look like or sound like or any of those various qualities about them, true friendships and all the little things in life make such a difference. And if that isn't where our true Christianity is to be expressed and experienced, what is? What is? How we exercise our Christianity surely is in how we respond to people and the way we develop our friendships with anybody. Not just in equality, but in equity. Not just in diversity, but yes, diversity, but also inclusion as we involve one another in all we attempt to do. Now the guiding movement is right up the centre of that kind of thing, particularly to do with friendships as well. I'm going to invite Rachel out to the front to tell us a little bit about her experience with guiding. But just as she comes out, I want to play just a little short video because Rachel visited Soweto. I pronounced it completely wrong, haven't I? Lesotho, sorry. We can say it really wasn't Soweto, was it? But had it been Soweto, it would have been just as enthralled. Lesotho and Lesotho.
summer of 2019 attended a girl guiding partnership with Lesotho Girl Guiding. So after being up for selection with 150 girls from all around Scotland, 10 of us were selected to go and represent Girl Guiding Scotland in Lesotho. The Lesotho Partnership was something that was set up back in 2015 to allow friendship to be built through two different countries with two different cultures, and we went over and we engaged in a cultural exchange, and they showed us their culture also. In that video there, that was the closing ceremony of our trip, and a song that we had sung in Scotland and they had sung in Lesotho that we both knew, we didn't know that we knew it, and it showed the friendship and the importance of a partnership between Girl Guiding. I spoke to you briefly this time last year about the trip that I was about to undertake, but I've now been to the trip and experienced incredible things. Starting off from leaving Glasgow Airport on the 1st of August, having a slight delay in Dubai and having to stay in a really, really not luxurious hotel in Dubai for a couple of nights, we embarked our journey to Lesotho. The full reason that we decided to go to Lesotho and encourage the partnership was to allow Girl Guiding Scotland to tackle an initiative that they have decided of period poverty. So period poverty is the lack of resources to deal with young girls' periods, and in Lesotho it is a very poor country and the girls would not be allowed to go to school when on their periods. So we went over there with our main initiative to go into the schools and teach these girls how to be able to go to school on their periods, and also engage in cultural exchange. We taught the girls lots of Scottish songs, they taught us Lesotho songs, we taught them a Scottish craft that our brownies took part in on Tuesday night. Not going to lie, the girls in Lesotho done it a lot better than our brownies. And we also went to camp with the girls in Lesotho. Some of our guides and brownies have been to camp with us before, and it was a quite pleasant experience. I have camped many times in Scotland, but this was definitely one of the strangest, coldest experiences of camping before. But it was a great experience to see how they camped. For some of the girls are coming over to Scotland this summer to take part in Camp Brave, which is held in Edinburgh, and we allowed them to show them things that they wouldn't know, that you would need a jacket to go camping with, because it is cold here, and although it's cold there, it's not as cold as it is here. We also made a lot of friendship. We are two completely different countries. We hadn't had many similarities at all, but we were all girl guides, and that's what made us the same. That's what allowed us to become friends, was because we were all girl guides and we all had the same connection. Some of the girls that we met in Lesotho would have never will have some of the things that we have and the opportunities that we have here. Simple things like going to the toilet. I scared the girls on Tuesday night by showing them a picture of the toilet. Simple things like we dread going to school here in Scotland. Do you think it's a hardship that we have to go and sit in a classroom for 6 hours on a chair? But these kids walk for an hour and a half to get to school, to then sit on the floor to go to school, because they're so grateful for the education here. But allowing to see the differences made us grow stronger. We've got friendships with girls who wouldn't even know what an iPhone was, but we were still friends because we were girl guides, and that's what made it so important. Even with